I don't remember what I was fixing when she first walked in, only that my hand stopped moving. The fan above the counter hummed in uneven circles, pushing around the smell of oil and old wood. The shop was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets every sound become more important than it should be. Her heels on the concrete, the soft click of a zipper, the pause before she spoke. "Do you do restorations?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a steadiness that didn't match the nervous rhythm in her fingers as she set an old camera on the counter. A Leica, the kind people keep, not because they use it, but because it means something. "Sometimes," I said, wiping my hands. "Depends on what kind of shape it's in." She smiled, not with her mouth, exactly, but with her eyes. The kind of smile that tells you she's used to being understood without saying much. "It's in better shape than I am," she said, then quickly looked away, as if the sentence had slipped out wrong. There was a silence, not awkward, just careful. I nodded, pretending to inspect the camera, though I was mostly trying not to look at her too long. She was older, but not in the way that meant distant. Her presence had a quiet gravity, like she'd lived through more than she'd ever admit and still carried herself like it hadn't broken her. Her name, I found out later, was Clara. That day, I only knew her as the woman who kept her coat on even when the room was warm. She came back the next week. I was surprised, not that she returned, but that she remembered my name. "How's the Leica?" I asked, wiping down the counter again. "Still broken," she said, smiling faintly. "But you look like someone who doesn't mind broken things." I laughed, but it came out smaller than I intended. She didn't mean it as a compliment, but it stayed with me anyway. We talked about film mostly, about how she used to take pictures of her son when he was young, about how everything digital felt too clean now, too fast. She liked things that took time. That part stuck with me, too. While she spoke, I noticed the details you only catch when you're trying not to stare. The way her thumb traced the edge of the camera case, the faint freckle near her jaw, how she avoided my eyes only when she was saying something that mattered. When she left, she touched my arm. Just a light, brief touch, meant to say thank you. But it stayed, like warmth that doesn't fade even after the person's gone. 2 days later, she stopped by again. No camera this time. Just coffee in a paper cup and a folded newspaper under her arm. "Thought you might want this," she said, handing me the coffee. "You looked tired the other day." "I was fine," I said, though my voice cracked on the last word. "I know," she said softly. "But take it anyway." Her hand lingered when I reached for the cup. Not long, not obvious. Just enough that it felt like something had been exchanged. Something unnamed. I wanted to ask why she cared. Or maybe I wanted to know if she did. Instead, I said, "You don't have to keep coming by." She smiled, that quiet kind again. "I know. That's why I do." There was nothing more to say after that. She turned toward the door, paused like she'd forgotten something, then just said, almost to herself, "Don't cry." I didn't answer then. Couldn't. But later that night, when the shop was dark, when the coffee had gone cold, and her words wouldn't leave my head, I whispered into the empty air, "Then don't leave." The third time Clara came by, it was raining, that kind of thin, steady rain that makes the world sound quieter than usual. She stood in the doorway a moment longer than she needed to, closing her umbrella with careful fingers, droplets sliding off like they didn't want to leave her. "You're open late," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, half smiling. Figured fixing things was better than thinking too much. Her eyes lingered on me then, not warmly, not coldly either. Just long enough to make me forget what I'd meant to say next. She set the same old Leica on the counter again. "I think the shutter's sticking now." "I can take a look," I said, reaching for it. Our hands brushed, just briefly, but she pulled back like the touch burned. For the next hour, I worked while she sat near the front window. She didn't talk much. Occasionally, she'd hum softly, a tune I didn't recognize, something half forgotten. When she thought I wasn't watching, she rubbed the inside of her wrist like it ached. Every few minutes, I'd catch her reflection in the glass, her posture perfectly straight, her eyes distant. But every time I asked if she wanted to grab a chair, she'd just shake her head. "I'm fine standing," she said. "I sit too much these days." The rain kept its rhythm. The smell of it mixed with the old wood of the shop, the faint sweetness of her perfume, something understated, maybe jasmine or sandalwood. I couldn't tell. I only knew it didn't fit the way I'd imagined older women smelling. She noticed me watching once. "You stare," she said softly, without accusation. "I just notice things." Her lips curved, almost a smile. "That's a dangerous habit." "Why?" "Because people don't like being seen that closely." There was something in the way she said it, quiet, almost brittle, like she wasn't warning me for my sake, but for hers. When I finished fixing the shutter, I tested the camera and handed it back. She held it like it was something fragile, something she wasn't sure she deserved to keep. "Does it work?" I asked. She pressed the shutter. The soft click echoed faintly in the quiet shop. "Yes," she said, almost whispering. "It works better than I do." I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. Instead, I watched her as she slipped the strap around her neck, fingers trembling just slightly. Her nails were short, uneven, the kind that tell you she bites them when no one's watching. "Rough day?" I asked. "Rough year," she said. Then, with a forced little laugh. "But that's not your problem." "Maybe not," I said, "but it's something I noticed." For the first time, she met my eyes fully. No guarded humor, no deflection. Just rawness, unpolished, tired, real. Something in the air shifted. Not romantic. Not yet. Just an awareness, like two people realizing they'd been holding their breath for too long. She exhaled first. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she said. "Like what?" "Like you already know me." And before I could answer, she turned toward the door, her reflection blurring in the rain-slicked glass. Her umbrella opened, her shape fading into the gray streetlight outside, and I stood there, still holding the ghost of her voice in the air, wondering why her leaving felt heavier than it should. The storm started early that evening, wind first, then the kind of rain that sounds like it's trying to erase everything it touches. Clara had come by to pick up the Leica, claiming she just happened to be nearby, though her hair was damp and her coat dripped onto the floor. "I can wait till it clears," she said, unwrapping her scarf. "Unless you want me out of your way." "You're fine," I said, handing her a towel. "Stay? It's better in here than out there." She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers brushed mine, just lightly, an accidental, careful kind of contact. She didn't pull away this time. I made coffee, poured it into 2 chipped mugs. She leaned against the counter, her gaze following the rain through the glass. "You ever think," she murmured, "that some storms are just excuses to stop pretending you're fine?" I didn't answer. I didn't know if she was talking to me or herself. For a while, we sat in the quiet, her on the stool near the workbench, me pretending to organize tools I'd already cleaned twice. The air was warm and smelled faintly of wet fabric and coffee. "You could have called," I said eventually. "About the camera, I mean." "I could have," she said. Then after a pause, "But I didn't want to." There was something sharp and soft in the way she said it, something that reached for meaning and stopped halfway there. I turned, leaning against the bench. "You don't seem like the type who needs excuses." She looked at me, really looked. "You don't know what type I am." "Maybe I'm trying to." She smiled, but it faltered almost immediately. "Careful," she said. "Curiosity can ruin things." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed, that low, vibrating sound that breaks something in the air. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening just enough for me to notice. She didn't answer, just flipped it over, screen down. "Everything okay?" "Depends on who you ask," she said. "Old stories. They don't end just because you stop telling them." The rain outside grew heavier, and the shop lights flickered. For a moment, the world felt suspended. Just her, me, and the faint sound of thunder in the distance. I sat beside her, close enough to see the faint crease beneath her eye, the line where her lipstick had worn away. She smelled like rain and memory, familiar, but not mine. "You ever wish you could start over?" I asked quietly. "Every day," she said. Then, with a small, tired laugh, "But starting over is a young person's illusion." "I don't think so." She turned, eyes glinting with something unreadable. "You wouldn't. You still believe wanting something badly enough makes it right." Her words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, nodding slowly. "Maybe it just makes it honest." That silence again, the one filled with all the things we weren't supposed to say. Her hand moved slightly, brushing against mine on the bench. Neither of us moved away this time. She looked at our hands, then at me, her breath caught halfway between caution and something else entirely. Then, mercifully or cruelly, her phone buzzed again. Louder. She stood, almost abruptly. I should go, she said, her voice thinner now. Wait. But she was already reaching for her coat. She didn't look back when she said it. Just her voice, low, almost trembling. Don't make this harder than it already is. The door opened, rain spilling in around her, and before I could think of what to say, what not to say, she was gone again. And I sat there, staring at the half-empty mug she left behind, still warm. It had been 2 weeks since the storm. She hadn't come by, not once. I'd stopped glancing at the door every time the bell above it chimed, or at least I told myself I had. But when she finally did appear again, it was late, past closing. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, the exhaustion in her face sharper somehow. She looked like someone who'd been running, not physically, but from something she couldn't outrun. Sorry, she said quietly, standing in the doorway. I know it's late. It's fine. The word felt too small. She wasn't fine. Neither was I. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room like she'd forgotten what to say. Finally, she exhaled and said, I don't even know why I came. I tried to smile. Habit. She almost laughed. Don't make this into something simple. I didn't. I couldn't. We stood there in that strange, charged silence. The air felt heavier, as if the walls were listening. I motioned to the counter. You can sit. She didn't. Every time I come here, I forget how small this place is. Small's not always bad, I said. She met my eyes then, a long, unguarded look that made the space between us feel too narrow. Sometimes it is, she said. Sometimes it doesn't give you anywhere to hide. I swallowed. My voice came out rougher than I wanted. Are you hiding from me? Her answer took too long to come. No. From myself. There it was. The crack in her voice, the kind you don't fix. I wanted to move closer, not to touch her, just to stand near enough that she'd know she wasn't alone. But something about her stillness stopped me. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms, but her fingers gripped her sleeves too tightly. You make it look easy, she said. What? Caring. Noticing things. Like it doesn't cost you anything. It does, I said. She looked at me then, like she was searching for proof. Then why do you keep doing it? I don't know. Maybe because you never asked me to stop. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Just that silence again. Heavy, electric, unbearable. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. What are we doing? I didn't answer. Not right away. I didn't trust the truth, that I'd been thinking the same thing every night since she walked into my life with that broken camera and that perfect, impossible distance. So I said, I don't know. But whatever it is, it doesn't feel wrong. Her eyes closed for a moment, long enough for me to see the conflict break across her face. When she opened them again, they were wet, though she didn't cry. Everything good in my life starts like this, she said softly, and ends worse. The room was too quiet. My throat felt tight. Then maybe this doesn't have to end, I whispered. She shook her head, almost a smile, almost a sob. You're too young to believe that, she said, her voice trembling for the first time. And I'm too old to pretend I do. The next time I saw Clara, she wasn't herself. She came in early, before the shop even opened, standing outside in the fog like someone waiting for courage to arrive. I unlocked the door without saying anything. She walked past me, sat down at the counter, and set her phone in front of her. Can I just sit here a while? She asked. I nodded. Of course. She didn't look at me, not once. Her hand stayed wrapped around her phone, knuckles pale, as if she was afraid to let it go. For a long while, the only sound was the low hum of the old fridge in the back and the faint shuffle of her breathing. Then, quietly, she pressed play. It was a voicemail. A man's voice. Older, calm, familiar in that distant way, like someone she'd once loved and stopped recognizing. Clara, I just wanted to hear your voice. I know you won't call back, and I get it. God, I miss the way we used to talk. Before everything went wrong. She stopped it there. Didn't let it finish. I wasn't supposed to keep that, she said, voice thin as paper. It's from 2 years ago. I didn't move. Didn't know how to. He died last year, she said finally. Heart attack. We hadn't spoken in months. The words dropped between us like something heavy and delicate at once. She looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. You know what's strange? I thought grief would make me softer. It didn't. It made me meaner. I leaned against the workbench, trying to steady my voice. You don't seem mean. That's because you met me too late. There was a pause, the kind that fills with every unasked question. I wanted to reach for her hand, but she was already turning the phone over, hiding the screen like it might expose too much. He was a photographer, she said. Taught me how to use that Leica. Said every picture should feel like a confession. I glanced toward the camera case sitting on the shelf. It suddenly looked heavier, too. That's why you kept it, I said quietly. She nodded. It's the last thing he touched. I wanted to fix it, not because it was broken, but because I couldn't fix him. Her voice cracked on that last word. Him. And something inside me did too. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just stood there, letting the silence hold what words couldn't. After a while, she stood, slipping her coat back on. The morning light through the window made her look younger and older at the same time, softer around the edges, but carved deeper somewhere unseen. I shouldn't keep coming here, she said quietly. You make it too easy to forget what I've already lost. My throat tightened. You don't have to forget. She looked at me then, steady, unblinking. No, she said, but I do have to stop remembering this way. She reached for the door, hesitated, then turned back just once. You remind me of him, she said. Not in how you look, in how you wait. And then she was gone, again, leaving the smell of rain and coffee behind, and a single phrase that wouldn't stop echoing in my chest. You remind me of him. It was closing time again when Clara returned, the kind of dusk that turns everything silver and half-remembered. She didn't knock this time, just stepped inside like she belonged there. I didn't ask why she came. Maybe because I already knew. She set her bag on the counter, her shoulders tense, her eyes tired. Not from crying. She wasn't the type to cry where anyone could see, but from holding too much inside for too long. I went to his grave today, she said quietly. Didn't say anything. Didn't know what to say. I nodded, waiting. She glanced at me, a faint smile pulling at her mouth. You'd probably tell me silence says enough. I shrugged. Sometimes it does. She exhaled slow. I hate that you're right. We sat on the floor, against the counter, the way you do when words have nowhere else to go. The lights were dim. The rain had started again, soft against the windows. For a while, there was just the rhythm of it, her breathing, the hum of the fridge, my heartbeat somewhere between the two. You remind me less of him now, she said finally, and more of someone I haven't met yet. I didn't know what that meant, exactly, but the way she said it made me want to stay perfectly still, as if moving might break the spell. I'm not trying to replace him, I said. I know. She looked down at her hands. That's why it's harder. She rested her head back against the counter. I told myself I was done feeling things that complicated. I turned toward her, studying the profile of her face in the low light. The lines that didn't look like flaws, the stillness that always carried more truth than words. I told myself a lot of things too, I said. Most of them stopped being true after you walked in here. She laughed, softly, almost disbelieving. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because I'll start believing you mean them. Her voice broke just slightly at the end. She wasn't asking for reassurance, just acknowledging how fragile it all was. I reached out slowly. My hand found hers where it rested on her knee. For a second, she didn't move. Then her fingers, trembling faintly, curled around mine. No words. No grand confession. Just that, the quiet collapse of distance. She closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. You know this can't really go anywhere, she whispered. I know, I said. And you'll still stay? For a while, I said. As long as you let me. She nodded once, her hand tightening around mine. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. Inside, nothing moved except our breathing. There was no kiss, no promise. Just the kind of closeness that doesn't need either. The shared understanding that some connections don't belong to forever, but to the small, fleeting moments where both people stop pretending they're fine. Her head leaned gently against my shoulder. I felt her sigh, not sad, not content, just real. After a while, she whispered, almost to herself, "You make it hurt less." And that was it. No more words, no more pretending. Just her warmth against my arm, the ticking of the old clock, and the quiet truth settling between us. That sometimes love doesn't arrive loudly. It just stays until it can't. It's been months now since the last time I saw Clara. The shop feels different. Same smell of oil and dust, same hum from the old fan, but quieter somehow. Or maybe I've just learned how to hear the quiet differently. There's a kind of peace in it now, a stillness that doesn't ache the way it used to. I still keep the Leica on the shelf behind the counter. She told me to keep it, said I'd earned it, though I'm not sure what she meant. I've never taken a photo with it. I think some things are meant to stay still. Sometimes I catch myself talking to her in my head. Not in a haunted way. Just the kind of internal conversation you keep with someone who changed the shape of your silence. I don't think we ever fell in love, not in the way stories like to frame it. What happened between us felt quieter, something closer to recognition. Two people standing at different points in their lives, meeting in the overlap. She taught me that love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about seeing someone clearly enough that they can leave lighter. I remember her saying once, "You notice too much." Maybe she was right. But now I think noticing is its own kind of care. The way your eyes learn to trace details you'll never touch again, just to keep them alive a little longer. A few weeks after she stopped coming, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in ink that had smudged slightly. Inside was a single photograph. Black and white. Grainy. It was the shop. Empty, except for the counter and one stool near the window. The light slanted just right. Dust suspended in the air. On the back, she'd written, "Some moments don't need people to be full of them." I stared at that for a long time. Then I set it next to the Leica and didn't move it again. People ask sometimes why I still fix old things. Cameras, clocks, radios. Maybe it's because broken doesn't always mean finished. Sometimes it just means waiting for a softer set of hands. Clara made me understand that. That time doesn't heal so much as quiet what once screamed. I still think of that night she leaned against my shoulder and said, "You make it hurt less." I didn't realize until later that she was doing the same for me. Now, when the shop gets too still, I pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit. One for me, one for no one. The air fills with the smell of something that almost was, and I smile, because even almost is a kind of having. If you've ever had someone walk into your life and change it without meaning to, someone who left behind more calm than chaos, you'll understand. Love doesn't always stay, but it leaves traces that do. So tell me, have you ever met someone who didn't stay, but never really left?